Welcome to Life L'Chaim. On today's show, we welcome Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman-Schultz, chair of the Democratic Party. We'll discuss the upcoming elections, Israel, and everything in between. We'll be back with the Congresswoman right after these messages.
With us in studio today, we're privileged to have Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman-Schultz and DNC Chair.
Yes.
Congresswoman, it's a pleasure to have you with us on To Life L'Chaim.
Great to be back. Thank you.
Are you having fun?
I am having fun.
Yeah?
Yeah, you know, whenever you're working for a cause that you believe in, and, you know, I made Tikkun Olam a career choice. Mm-hmm. So you're being able to represent my constituents in the nation's capital and, you know, working every day to help make their lives better and make the world a better place is an incredible privilege.
Certainly the DNC chair has furthered your limelight.
Yes.
Around the country and have made you a lightning rod of sorts. Is that an enjoyable position for you to be in? Constant being a target?
You know, when you're asked by the President of the United States of America to do anything, it's an incredible privilege. So President Obama called me just a little bit over a year ago and asked me to take on what is essentially a third full-time job, being my children's mom. I have twin 13-year-olds who were just born bat mitzvah, as a matter of fact, right, a month ago, and an 8-year-old daughter. That's my first responsibility. And, you know, I said yes to President Obama because I knew that the impact of the wrong decision being made by voters and the possibility of President Obama not being able to continue in doing the good job that he's been doing would affect my children and the children of the constituents that I represent and families across the country for decades and really for generations. So in order to make sure that I could continue to go to bat for improving the quality of life of all Americans, I was proud to accept President Obama's request to chair the DNC and help bring him across the finish line.
Certainly this is a pivotal election in our country's history. How do you see it playing out?
Well, I think there are two visions and two paths that have been laid out. You've never had a more stark contrast in any election than in this one. There's a lot at stake in this election. President Obama has been focused on creating jobs and getting the economy turned around, fighting for the middle class and working families, making sure that we can make critical investments in education and health care, rescuing the American automobile industry, fighting for civil rights and civil liberties, repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and declaring his support for marriage equality, fighting for a woman's right to make her own reproductive choices, compared to Mitt Romney's vision and path that he would take us down, which would take us back to the failed policies of the past, which would really take the most extreme positions that we've ever had in a presidential candidate on immigration, on civil rights and civil liberties. He would end a woman's right to make her own reproductive choices, supports a constitutional amendment to overturn Roe versus Wade, believes in not allowing people to marry who they love, and really has focused not on job creation, but on in his record in the private sector on outsourcing and making as much money as possible for his investors rather than trying to focus on American jobs.
Is Governor Romney qualified to be president?
Oh, sure, I think he's qualified to be president. He's certainly not the right choice to be president, and he wouldn't take this country in the right direction.
When you say he's extreme, isn't there, I mean, certainly he was the governor of a liberal state, and certainly a Democratic state, so he couldn't have been extreme to earn that position.
Well, he was extremely bad when he was governor of Massachusetts. I mean, Governor Romney likes to tout his 25 years of private sector experience as being the main qualification for his candidacy for president. You don't hear him talk much about his time as governor because there's not much to talk about. He says that his record of job creation, so-called job creation at Bain, is the reason we should elect him. Yet when he had that one shot at applying his private sector experience in the public sector as governor of Massachusetts, Massachusetts was 47th out of 50th in job creation. They lost manufacturing jobs in Massachusetts at twice the national rate. He increased taxes and fees and cut education. Really, there is not a very good record. In fact, there's an extremely poor record of his stewardship of Massachusetts, and that's certainly not something we should allow him to take to the national stage.
Let me talk philosophically, because certainly in politics today, and with other congressional leaders that we spoke to and other business leaders that they spoke to, they talk about this divide that couldn't be more present in politics than in our history. And certainly there are two courses, both views of where we're heading. How does it come together? How does it come together to get job one done?
You know, for the sake of our country, it really needs to come together. What's been sad for me, I mean, this is my 20th year in public office, and you know, I have always reached across the aisle, known that you can't engage in my way or the highway politics, and you have to compromise. But you have leaders on the Republican side now who've embraced extremism to such an extent, who've allowed the Tea Party to take over their decision-making. John Boehner said on national TV, the Speaker of the House, that he couldn't even say the word compromise because they're singularly focused on one job, on Barack Obama's job. And you know, Mitch McConnell, the minority leader of the United States Senate, said that his number one job, his number one priority for this Congress wasn't creating jobs. It wasn't getting the economy turned around. It was defeating Barack Obama. So it makes, when you have the Republicans take such an extreme position like that, and a cynical one, it makes compromise very hard. I mean, just for example, to demonstrate how Democrats have consistently been supportive and willing to come to the table to meet them halfway. Last summer, when we supported the debt ceiling deal that President Obama forged with the Republicans, we supported $1.5 trillion in cuts to reduce our deficit. Now, we still need to do even more than that, but it was a cuts-only approach. We did it their way. I voted for cuts that I have spent my career opposing because I knew it was important for us to do things halfway, you know, to meet each other in the middle. The Republicans have no interest in doing that. They want to cut our way to deficit reduction, and we've heard from major economists that say that that would really slow or stall our recovery, which is already fragile. So, you know, the my way, the highway politics that the Republicans engage in isn't working for us.
But it is both, because certainly I think you know, people will say that the rhetoric that you're talking about here goes a long way towards creating that divide.
On the contrary, what I'm saying is that we need to come together and compromise. What President Obama is saying is we need to meet each other halfway. I know that everything can't go my way, but we have Republicans who refuse to work with the Democrats, who think of compromise as a dirty word. John Boehner said it was a dirty word. It means that they're not going to get their way. We've got a Republican candidate, Tea Party candidate for the United States Senate in Indiana, who in defeating his Republican incumbent primary opponent said that his definition of compromise is that the Democrats should do it their way. How are we supposed? It really feels very one-sided. One side willing to work together, one side, the Democrats understanding with President Obama's leadership that we need to come together and work through our challenges. We'd make a lot more progress. You know, we've already made tremendous amount of progress. The economy was hemorrhaging 750,000 jobs a month when President Obama took office. We've now, after his policies, had 27 straight months of job growth in the private sector, but we've done that alone. The Republicans have refused to help. Just imagine how much progress we could make if they came to the table and worked with us.
The flip side of that, and certainly there has been growth in jobs, but the flip side of that is that there's a tremendous amount of people who are leaving the job market altogether, that they're not even being counted in any Bureau of Labor Statistics.
No, but the Department of Labor statistics that show the job growth are not counting those individuals. The job growth that we've had is credible job growth that cannot be discounted as a result of people who've left the job market.
Well, then how would you describe what the labor participation rate is?
The labor participation rate is reflective of the fact that through 27 straight months of labor statistics, we've had job growth in the private sector, more than 4.3 million jobs created in the private sector, and that's from a place where we were losing 750,000 jobs a month. So we've begun to turn things around. Right. We've got to really continue to push hard and make more progress, but we've come a long way.
But still, according to the BLS, there are people who it's never been higher for those that have been long-term unemployed.
But there have been more jobs created than people who have stopped looking for work.
We have a lot to cover. There's a lot to talk about. In terms of what's happening in Egypt with President Morsi being elected, would you classify the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization?
Well, I think they certainly have a terrorist element, and are not an organization that has that has renounced terrorism. So by my definition, because of that, they have a terrorist wing. So yes, they have had terrorist activity in the past.
Mm-hmm. So how do you think his rise to power will affect Israel?
Well, I mean, I was heartened to see that that the president, the new president of Egypt, has said that they would honor the peace treaty with Israel. And like the spokesperson for President Obama had said the other day, we have to judge Egypt's leaders by their actions, not by their religious affiliation or their organizational affiliation. And so, because there's a democratic process that evolved through the Arab Spring, we'll see how much power the military in Egypt turns over to the new president. But I'm heartened by the fact that they have said that they would honor those treaties, that they seem to not be rushing to embrace Hamas or give them too much more flexibility than they had under the previous administration. But we're going to have to keep a watchful eye on Egypt and make sure that we hold them accountable for democratic reform that we should have every right to expect.
Does the conflict that's going on now between the president and SCAF, the military leadership, is that look forward to the potential of a civil war in Egypt?
Oh, I think I certainly hope not. I
Okay.
mean I think it would be hard for me to say. It's too early to tell.
Okay.
I certainly hope that they're going to continue to move towards the democratic reform that the people in Tahrir Square insisted upon. I would expect that the Egyptian people would have little tolerance for there to remain military rule and for the democratic process not to be allowed to work.
Okay. Switching gears to Iran, and certainly there's dialogue going on behind the scenes, and with respect to recently, with the beginning of July, the EU went into effect in terms of stopping purchase of Iranian oil.
Right.
So what kind of impact do you foresee that having?
Well, President Obama has led the world to adopt the most biting sanctions, economic sanctions that Iran has ever seen, including essentially a shutting down of access to the Iran Central Bank, making sure that we brought through the UN Security Council sanctions with China and Russia in support of it, the most biting UN sanctions, followed by the most significant sanctions from the United States, followed by the EU sanctions. So Iran is about as isolated as they have ever been, and it's really dramatically impacted the progress that they've been able to make towards their clear goal of trying to achieve a nuclear weapon. At the same time, President Obama recognizes that although he's the commander-in-chief, he views his responsibility as commander-in-chief to keep us out of war as much and as long as possible, leaving all options on the table. So clearly, we're not going. I mean, he's made it clear. President Obama's made it clear we are not going to allow Iran to achieve, to become a nuclear state, and to achieve nuclear capability, and that we're going to explore all the options and utilize all the tools that we have at our disposal to prevent them from accomplishing that goal.
If there's military action down the road, do you believe anything may happen prior to the election?
Well, I hope there's not military action prior to, down the road, because I hope that the economic sanctions and the diplomatic efforts will be successful. It's hard to say whether or not, what the timing of military action would be if there is any.
The world is skeptical, though. I think most of us are skeptical that Iran will ever come around, especially when you hear the rhetoric that recently came out of Ahmadinejad's mouth again, that he's ready, willing, and able to wipe Israel off the face of the world. And so that rhetoric doesn't stop. So in terms of, it truly is tough to have hope that any sanctions, no matter how severe, are going to isolate them enough for them to stop their nuclear program.
Well, we've had the closest military and intelligence cooperation that we've ever had with Israel. And so you essentially don't know where our military and intelligence leadership begins and Israel's ends in terms of the tightness of the cooperation. So I'm confident, given the intelligence and military conversations, the classified briefings that I've been able to be privy to, that we are going to carefully coordinate with Israel on whether the other efforts outside of the military option are making enough progress or holding Iran back enough for us to not have to pursue military action.
Does the cyber war that's been undertaken by the U.S. and Israelis, does that invite a cyber war in return against the United States?
I don't think so. On the contrary, I think I'm actually kind of proud of the Israeli and American leadership at being able to use technology to basically infect Iran's quest to be a nuclear power and to slow that down. And it's gave me a little bit of pride as a nice Jewish girl from South Florida.
Right. Very good. How has your Judaism affected your politics?
Well, I'm the first Jewish woman to represent Florida in the United States Congress, and the best way to describe it is that I bring my love of Israel to work with me every single day. And as I said earlier, Tikkun Olam for me was a career choice. I sponsored the first bill that I sponsored and passed was the bill that created Jewish American Heritage Month, which is celebrated annually now in May and was first signed by President Bush, now subsequently by President Obama, and makes sure that we can help Americans understand that we're both a religion and a culture. That we're only 2% of the population, so a lot of Americans, most Americans in fact, probably never encounter a Jewish person in their lives or certainly not on a regular basis. So promoting tolerance and understanding will hopefully reduce bigotry and anti-Semitism. And so we want to educate folks about the 350 some odd years of contributions that Jews have made to American life. And so that's one of the ways I've been able to use my Judaism in my job to help make sure that we can just be a better country. Right.
Certainly the Jewish vote is extremely important in South Florida. As South Florida goes, so goes the nation, and certainly as the fourth largest community on the face of the earth of Jews, extremely important.
Right, absolutely.
In 2008, the president captured upwards of 78% of the Jewish vote. How do you see that translating in the coming election?
Well, I think the natural home politically for Jews in America is the Democratic Party, and there's good reason for that. Domestically, on the issues that matter to Jews, making investments in education, making investments in health care, good quality public education, making sure that we can invest in health care research and education that ensures that we are as competitive as we can be globally, fighting for civil rights and civil liberties, standing up for a woman's right to make her own reproductive choices. Those are all issues that Democrats have championed, and it's why domestically Jews have overwhelmingly supported Democrats. President Obama has had a stellar record on Israel as well. There are countless examples of that. So both for the record on domestic issues as well as for President Obama's record on Israel, President Obama is well ahead of Mitt Romney in all the polling that's been done with the Jewish community, and I think he'll capture the overwhelming majority of the Jewish vote once again.
Right. Certainly there's some polls going back a number of months in which it had eroded to 55%. More recent polls had that Jewish support up to 65%, so there's been some uptick. Has the president done anything wrong with respect to the Jewish vote?
No, on the contrary. The president has an incredible record of support and advocacy on the issues domestically that Jews care about, fighting, for example, to make sure that women have the right to make their own reproductive choices, fighting to pass the Affordable Care Act to make sure that being a woman is not a pre-existing condition and that insurance companies can't drop us or deny us coverage, making sure that we have access to affordable birth control without a deductible or a copay, while Mitt Romney and the Republicans have fought to take us back to a time when we couldn't make our own reproductive choices, when you didn't have access to birth control. I mean, we're refighting the same cultural and social battles with the Republicans because they're controlled by the extremists in the Tea Party. And so President Obama has earned the support of the Jewish community. In fact, President Obama's polling in the Jewish community specifically is well ahead of where he was against John McCain at the same point in 2008. So, we're not going to take anything for granted.
Right.
We're working hard to reach out to the Jewish community and make sure that we debunk those myths, because the Republicans are working overtime. They know that they can't get anywhere with Jewish voters domestically because the Republicans are so dramatically out of step with the Jews on those issues. So what they have to do is resort to lying and distorting and mischaracterizing President Obama's stellar record on Israel so they can try to shave a little bit off in the battleground states like Florida and hopefully close the gap.
Respectfully, though, Congresswoman, certainly 4 years ago when the president was a more unknown quantity, I can understand how those statistics were lower in terms of his support. But now that he's a known quantity...
Well, he got 78% of the votes.
Correct. But he was, when you talk about the same time of where he was now versus when he was running for the first time in office. But what accounts for that erosion? In terms of whether it's a 14-point loss, a 20-point loss, what accounts for that erosion?
When you have Republicans who are spending $13 million, when Sheldon Adelson has committed to spend his fortune distorting and lying about the president's record. Let's take a look at the president's record on Israel. He stood in front of the entire world at the UN and threw the gauntlet down and said, the only path to a two-state solution, the only way the Palestinians will achieve a state is through direct bilateral negotiations. And then he deployed his entire diplomatic corps to ensure that there wouldn't even be a vote, not just in the Security Council, but in the General Assembly as well, because he made sure the Palestinians understood what the consequences would be for pressing that vote. He stood with Israel time and again. We have, again, the most military and intelligence cooperation that we've ever had. He made sure that in the face of a difficult economy, he's made sure that we proposed and put past the most foreign aid assistance to Israel, more than $3.1 billion in foreign aid, more than $1 billion to fund the Iron Dome missile defense system so that Israel wouldn't have to deal with the rocket attacks and be able to protect themselves that come at them from the south, and now deploying those missile batteries all around the country. When Prime Minister Netanyahu couldn't get the 6 Israelis that were barricaded into the Israeli embassy in Egypt out, Prime Minister Netanyahu called Barack Obama in the middle of the night and asked for his help. President Obama stepped up and was able to get those 6 Israelis out to safety because he contacted the Egyptian leadership. So time and again, and there are countless other examples, this president has a stellar record on Israel. I'm proud to stand with him. And unfortunately, we have Republicans who, they know that their candidate has no appeal with Jewish voters on domestic issues. So their only option to try to shave off a few points is to put their love of party in front of their love of Israel, which is dangerous for Israel. Because if we create a perception in the world, especially in the Arab world with Israel's enemies, that there's somehow some daylight, non-existent daylight in the United States between the two parties on Israel, that's dangerous for Israel. So I want to make sure that, that we can consistently continue to stand by the strong U.S.-Israel relationship that we've always had, and Republicans need to stop jeopardizing Israel, as the Israeli leadership has consistently said, that using Israel as a political football is irresponsible.
Congresswoman, our time has gone very quickly.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
That's it for this edition. For more information on our show, please visit us on the web at tolifelchaim.com. I'm Lee Lazerson. Thank you very much for joining us. And to life, l'chaim.